on a couple points. One was a stat that companies that are offensive instead of defensive, as long as they manage their cash flow, are 50 to 65% more successful. Great opportunities. Back in when I was younger, we took a product which today is very, very, very successful, but back then it was a mail order product. Most people would go to a newsletter, and that's where they were, and say, well, you do a promotion. A promotion meant a static, a tactical activity.
All right, so you amazing people, we just finished an interview with a living legend. Jay Abraham's been doing this for over 40 years, and they, I think, have credited him with over 21, $22 billion worth of business improvement. He's the highest paid consultant on earth. Forbes says he's top 5, and is a mentor to some of the biggest A-lister names that you would know. Jay is the secret guy behind them, who is Tony Robbins' mentor and Damon John's mentor. And we talked about some really deep topics about adapting something that Jay has pioneered called the theory of preeminence, or the strategy of preeminence, to digital marketing agencies, and doing this in a different way, where instead of thinking about what you do as a little box of I'm doing Facebook ads or I'm doing Google ads, to really broadening your understanding of business to a greater contribution in a way that brings more leverage for you, meaning you're doing less and getting paid more, and people are happier, and you're contributing those relationships. And a lot of it really is just deep perspective and insights. And Jay's got some awesome stories to share with you guys. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys, and let's get into it.
All right, Jay.
1 second. Hold on.
Sure. All right, we're busy bragging about you. You take your time. We could brag about you for a while. So.
All right. Okay. Here I am. Okay. Frankie, where are you?
I am right now in La Paz, Baja California, Mexico. I don't know if you remember.
Where you live these days?
Yeah, it's I live in paradise, basically. I don't know if you remember,
I've never been there. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
It's right by, is it by Cabo?
Yeah. About 2 hours from here, but it's less touristy. So there's all the sunshine and beaches, but less of like everybody trying to sell you hats and trinkets and all that kind of stuff.
And so let me ask you this. What do you do for a livelihood these days?
I got a few things, but I think that's probably what we're going to get deep into is, so what I want to actually bring you on today is I've got a really awesome, good audience of digital marketing agency owners, and you're kind of a legend in our space in general. Okay. You're actually the legend in our space. For those of you guys,
is that true? Really?
You are to me. I mean,
I wonder if I am to everybody else. I mean, young people don't even know me, unfortunately, for me. Wow. So hold on 1 second. Let me turn one light on here that will give us a little more illumination. Okay, I am ready. What are we gonna? How long is this going to be? Just so I can mentally prep.
It's up to you. I mean, I'll keep you as long as you want to talk. Would you like me to give you an awesome intro, or should we just get talking about the important stuff?
Just do the latter. You can do an intro whenever you want. It's fine.
All right. Cool. Okay. Well, what I wanted, I would love your thoughts, because, you know, I mean, for those of you guys who don't know you, you've been at this game longer than a lot of people in our digital marketing space have been alive. 40, 50 years of just, you know, working with A-listers, growing top businesses, and really contributing. What I love about your message is all the purpose and the actually bringing real value to the marketplace. And kind of what's front and center in a lot of people's minds in our space is they're running these marketing campaigns for people. We're on the cusp of a recession, and often the first thing that gets cut out of a business is, let's turn off our Facebook ads. Let's let the web design guy go. Let's let the AdWords person, let's cut our budget here. And so for a lot of people, that can be like kind of a scary thing, but you've probably now been through what, like 3-4 recessions and grown in all of them?
8.
Well, there you go. 8.
8. Yeah, I've been through quite a few. 8 downturns. Maybe they all weren't recessions, but I've been through them since whatever, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 208, all those things, lots of them.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I mean, I don't think preeminence
Sure.
goes out of style in a recession. I don't think it's impossible to 10x a business in a recession, but
No,
there's
so let me give you a rat tat tat to start, and then we can go as deep or anywhere you want. Number one is more wealth, more success has been achieved in down markets, more opportunities, more possibilities, more competitors, as you say, retract and dive for cover. There's statistics that I looked at. I just got done doing a day with Tony Robbins. He and I every year do a day together for his platinum partners and his Lions. And I talked a lot about recession proofing a business. And one of the really, I was fixated on a couple points. One was a stat that companies that are offensive instead of defensive, as long as they manage their cash flow, are 50 to 65% more successful than companies that are defensive. So that's the first one. Second is markets may constrict, but people aren't going to just totally disappear. Most of your competitors, besides cutting what you're saying, there's a couple of great opportunities. The best people will normally get cut because they're the most expensive. So it's a wonderful opportunity to hire or partner with world-class talent. Hiring, if you can afford it, you can move part of your compensation to variable. You can hire people that have relationships and they can make contacts for you and you can give them a variable on it. The next thing is that if your competitors are cutting costs, they're cutting usually service, and their best clients are going to get the worst treatment, and that'll be opportunity for you. Third is if they're not really marketing a lot, anybody new coming in the market you can own. So that's one thing. The second or the third tier, Frankie, is yes, it's going to be a more inclement market. It requires you to be much more strategic in how and what you market. You're going to have to figure out, number one, the most high performing, and not just front end. You're going to have better back end. You're going to have better conversion capability. You're going to have to basically add to your model more either upsell or more resell so that you'll have more allocatable money to advertise. However, in a downward market, if it's a bid-based media, you're going to find the costs are lower. If it's fixed type advertising, a lot of the advertising media that you would normally have trouble working with is going to be flexible. You can get deals where you pay partially fixed, partially.
Can I just ask you a little bit can I just ask you a little bit to elaborate on that? Because I know you got,
sure.
you got some classic icy hot kind of stories about just kind of how partners can be flexible in times like.
So let me give you I mean, so you want me to tell that story? You want me to talk about it?
I don't get tired of it. I've heard it about 50 times, but I'd love to hear 51.
So people don't realize that many alternative advertising sources have unsold or poorly utilized advertising capability, and when it expires, you can't save it. A radio station can't add extra time tomorrow from today. It's gone when it's gone. A newspaper, if they don't sell every part of a page, it's gone. TV, the same. A podcaster, if he has nobody advertising, or she, when it's gone, it's gone. I mean, they can go back when it's archived and do it, but if people are looking for the news issue, and on and on and on. So there's great opportunities. Back in when I was younger, we took a product which today is very, very, very successful, but back then it was a mail order product called Icy Hot. The product sold for $3. We bought it thinking we were going to just use some of the facilities. We weren't even going to do the product, but upon analysis, we found that every time 10 new people bought a $3 jar, 8 of them repurchased every month, literally forever, until they died or somebody came up with a cure for arthritis. And of the 10, approximately half, 4 bought something else every month from the product line, and that wasn't the whole real opportunity. Of the 4, approximately 2 bought twice a year bulk. And bottom line was, every time we got 10 new first-time buyers, even though 2 never even repurchased, we were making $50 profit every year. We analyzed the analytical value of it. And with that, we didn't have any marketing budget. We went to radio stations, television stations, magazines, newspapers, people that had packages that we could stick things in. And we made deals that anytime they had availability, they use our ads, our promotional flyers, and we would not pay for it, but we'd give them 115% of the first sale, which was $3.45 on a $3 sale. And they thought we were crazy back then, but we knew that the back end was so valuable. And in truth, I realized as I got older, the guy that I worked with, who was the guy that formulated this and I learned from, was actually short-sighted. Given the fact that we had an infinite lifetime value, it was literally till they died, we could have paid $49 of the first year's 50, and we still would have been outrageously profitable in year 2, 3, 4. If we had the cash flow, and if we didn't have the cash flow and we could have proved it, we could have gotten almost anybody to finance it. So that was then. In the beginning of COVID, I had 900 radio stations that came to me because I was referred to in one of the radio newsletters as somebody who could figure out how to monetize, because all these radio stations lost all their advertisers and they had this unsold advertising, and they wanted me to help them, and they were willing to do barter. They were willing to do lead generating. They paid for, they're willing to do sales. They were willing to orchestrate custom deals like events, virtual dinner parties, anything I could come up with that would make the money that was variable. You're going to see a lot of that with more what I'll call marginal type media, but marginal media can be very, very profitable. Also, you're going to see a lot of discount. We have a friend that specializes in buying what he calls remnant advertising. He can buy Sirius satellite. He can buy local radio television. He can buy CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox, Lifetime, whatever you want, and stand by for 80% off. And to tell you how powerful that's now in a downward market, maybe it's 95%.
Can I just elaborate? Because we got a lot of younger folks listening to this who are more like digital based. Remnant ads being, I see this a lot in our legal space, like a TV station can't sell all their ads. They're willing to part with their unsold space, but you can't always plan it and say, I want it to run.
No, it's last minute. It's last minute, but it doesn't really matter. But here's a very important, we have as a client, the largest specialty company in timeshare contract cancellation. When I met them, they were doing 40 million. Now they're doing 130 million. And the whole genesis of that growth was they wanted to do radio and television, but every time they tried paying full rate, it never worked.
Right.
But full rate doesn't work, but 80% off worked like mad. And they were able to end up growing like hotcakes to 135, maybe 140 million now, just because they were able to use that opportunity. There's tons of opportunities out there. There's acquisitions. If you think about it, weaker companies that start breaking even or losing money, if they're lifestyle, if they're independent, the owner's working his or her ass off to make nothing. If you contact him or her and you consolidate that business into yours and you get rid of duplicated functions, you can pay that person more for doing nothing than they're making for a business that's going down the tubes. You can figure out what people buy before, during, after, instead of what you sell. I mean, I can go on and on, but if you have an agile mind and you're strategically motivated and you're not wedded to reactive mindset, a downward market is one of the most screamingly lucrative opportunities in the world if you have the right mental mind set and you look at it strategically and ethically, opportunistically.
I would love for you to share with us, because you are probably, in my opinion anyways, the greatest strategic mind on earth when it comes to business growth and mindset and marketing and all those things, of how Jay Abraham thinks about kind of exponentially growing a business. Because a lot of this, to me, is when you're thinking preeminence and things like that, is you're thinking like 2, 3, 4, 5 steps in advance, where most people are very just tactical on the surface, like hey, I'll send a letter in the mail and see what happens very reactively. I would love to know how you approach a company when you actually think about growing it strategically, and where your mind goes to, because you're
Yeah. Well, if I give you a couple stories, but they're going to be historic, but anybody in their right mind who's got any ability to extrapolate could see applications to them. But I'll tell you two really great ones that are true. And I had a role in both of them, so they would probably help out. So the first one happened many years ago because I was involved in the newsletter industry when it first started out. It was a bunch of very bright people who were not good marketers, but they were good economic thinkers and investment and analysts and stock pick stocks, but they couldn't market very well. And I had a company that I started helping that was a gold brokerage. People don't know this, young people don't know this. Today you can buy gold, but gold was illegal for many years. They illegalized it, then they legalized it again in 74 or 5, and then people started selling it. And I will tell 3 strategic stories. We'll tell 2 that are really good. And I had this client that was selling gold. It was a gold brokerage. And all the competitors, when it first became legalized, Frankie, were running ads in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, a newspaper business section. And that was reaching a small fraction of the readership was of interest in gold at that time. But I said to my client, well, why don't we go? I mean, I'm going to stop. Would everybody know who Gary Halbert was?
I sure hope so, but if they don't, I'll put some notes on this interview so they know.
So Gary Halbert used to, and this is an ADD rogue intervention moment, and then I'll come back to my story. Gary Halbert, who was a famous and a very, very brilliant copywriter who died, had a story he would tell all the time. He would say, if you and I were going to go into the restaurant business anywhere you wanted, your city, my city, any city, and each of us got a chance to have one advantage, what would you want? And he let you go first.
Well, I know the answer to the story, so you can't let me guess.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, everyone would come up with, I want the only Kentucky Fried Chicken. I want the only Pizza Hut. I want the only Domino's. I want the only McDonald's. I want the only, restaurant at the intervention of 5 different highways. And he'd say, you can have it. You can have it. And after everyone picked, he'd say, you know what I want? A starving crowd.
Yo.
So now go back to my story. So everyone was running ads and all this media where only a fraction of the audiences really cared about gold. And I said to my client, let's not go there. It's a waste. Let's go where the hungry crowd is. And the hungry crowd were the readers of all these newsletters because they tended to be conservatives. They tended to be what's called free market economics. A guy named it was Austrian economics. Think of the name of the guy who was known.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I'll think of it and come back. But these people were really staunch independent people, and they believed in gold as a hedge against inflation, as a transportable form of all kinds of things. So that's the first distinction. The second is talking about strategic thinking. The second distinction was most people would go to a newsletter, and that's where they were, and say, well, you do a promotion. A promotion meant a static, a tactical activity. And I didn't. I went to a bunch of them, 25 of them, and said, we want to be your recommended provider. We want every time a new subscriber comes in to you to send with their welcome packet, a packet we provided our cost that literally tells the story of hard assets, which are gold, silver, rare coins.
Yeah.
We want to pay the cost of 4 times a year, you putting out a special edition of your newsletter on the outlook for rare coins, for gold, for silver. We want to pay at our expense to promote regional seminars that you will speak at, our president will speak, and we will pay for an iconic author or someone of real desire to go to. That was the first part of our strategy. Then, and we would give them a share for that. Then when they're mail in the newsletter business, I'm going to get a little confusing. The newsletter business, people would mail promotional letters, subscription promotional offers to rented lists until they hit break even. Break even could be defined by these newsletter publishers one of two ways: with or without fulfillment of the actual newsletter. But it was very modest because back then there were special provisions in the mailing postal service where you could send it's called a second class publication out for literally pennies. So it didn't really, I mean, the $6 was not that relevant. But when they stopped mailing, it was because their offers stopped pulling at break even. The gold company, we had a deal where we got joint tenancy, joint ownership of all the names we helped them create. We would take the newsletter promotion they stopped mailing, the marketing piece, the sales letter. I would redo it. I'd change the headline. I'd change the risk reversal. I would change the bonuses. I would add whatever levers that I knew that were missing, and we would make it more powerful, and we would get half of the profits and joint use of the name. When it stopped working, if you know anything about the newsletter business, most newsletters are sold on the basis of the premium, the bonus.
Right.
The bonus can be
Sports Illustrated football phone for those of you guys.
Yeah, that's good. But in newsletter, it's the 25 stocks that are going to explode.
Right.
The strategy for wealth creation, no one else ever tells you. When it stopped working, we would take the sales letter and I would rework it as a lead generator for our gold company, where we would use the same bonus, but I would change it to where you get this bonus if you talk to us about the outlook for gold, because we reduced our cost of a lead using that by about 80%. So that's one way of being strategic. And we built it from $300,000 to $500 million, and we only paid on results. So our out of pocket, even though we funded everything ourselves for the newsletters, we funded them usually out of the money we made right away on the people that would buy from us for from basically new subscribers. Another approach, and this was a colleague of mine, it was really cool. So it goes back to the Gary Halbert story, because he was actually one of these people. So two people that I knew, Gary and this other man, both got interested in what's called cubic zirconium, which is simulated diamonds when they first came out. Right. They were looked like a real diamond, but they were nominally priced, very nominally priced. And both of them decided to get into that business. And Gary, who was a really brilliant copywriter, was very tactical. He was more oriented in just selling shit. The other guy wasn't as good a copywriter, but he was very strategic. So Gary sits down, and this is pretty funny, but it's actually a true story. He creates a company called the Beverly Hills Diamond Company, and something called the Beverly Hills Diamond, which is just the name he ascribed to a cubic zirconium. And he ran this full-page ad in the Los Angeles Times, front of a page of a section on a Sunday for $39.95 loose stone. And it cost him about $25,000, and it brought in about $46,000. And with all the costs and refunds and credit card and everything, he made about $7,000, which wasn't enough to excite him. So he never did it again. The second guy was very strategic, but not anywhere close to as good a copywriter, but he was really brilliant. He created a business called Van Cleef and Tiffany, which was a hilarious take on Van Cleef and Arpels, which is a New York, very, very high-end jeweler, and Tiffany's. And he created the Van Cleef diamond, which was another $39.95 a loose 1-carat stone. But Gary, when he did his business, because he was only front-end oriented, he stuck the stone he was selling in a shitty little corrugated envelope, in a cheap secondary envelope with a little like a buck slip explaining it, and sent it out. The second guy, who wrote a lesser, I forgot one part. He wrote a lesser powerful ad, and he also spent $25,000. I left a big piece out. And his ad did not pull 46, 7,000. It only pulled about 37 or 36,000. So he lost about 5 or 6,000 on the ad.
Yeah.
But instead of thinking, wow, I'm going to take my tent, close it, and leave and lick my wounds, he did something very different. He put the stone in a beautiful velvet jeweler's case, like a little bag, inside a simulated wood box, inside a beautifully protected envelope with 2 documents. Document 1 was a letter from him as the president that acknowledged the recipient and appreciated he or her for having had blind faith to take his company up on the offer to buy the 1 carat loose stone for $39.95. And it said the following, that what you're about to remove from the jeweler's velvet case is going to be more brilliant, more fiery, more electric, more dazzling and bedazzling than you can ever imagine, and it's going to humble you. But there's one more thing you have to know. It is going to seem smaller than you imagine, and you might think we've taken advantage of you, but quite the opposite is true. In order to get that level of enormous brilliance out of this man-made stone, it has to be denser, meaning more weight per whatever you want to call it, volume. And then he said, when people see how much more beautiful the stone is than they ever imagined, they have contacted us saying, can we buy 5 and 10 carat loose stones that we can take to our jeweler to set in rings and earrings and pendants and bracelets? And every time we've said yes and supplied them and followed up, their jewelers have charged them an arm and a leg for items because we are a manufacturing jeweler, would sell for half that price. And so, in respect for you having faith in us, we have taken some of the most beautiful 5, 10, 20 carat stones, preset them in beautiful 18, 14 carat white and gold settings, and you will see in with this package a catalog showing all the items that we sell at prices we guarantee are 50% or less what any jeweler would charge you set. And in order to prove that, we will guarantee that we won't even consider your purchase, if you wish to buy anything in this catalog, binding on your part for 60 days, enough time that 2 things have to happen. You have to take it to any respectful jeweler you like and ask him or her what they would charge to replace it, stone and setting. And if it's not at least twice what we charge, we won't even deserve to keep your money. We won't do it. Send it back and we'll refund it. Second, in grateful appreciation for you having invested $39.95 blindly, we want to acknowledge and reward you. So we were going to give you twice that credit back if you want to trade it in for one of these these larger size set pieces of jewelry. And to make it even easier, we have included a prepaid envelope here that you can put it in and send it back along with your order. Now, the first man, Gary Halbert, spent 25, made 7, quit. The second man spent 25, lost 6, and in year 1 made $28 million because he was strategic. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I actually love it. And I was just thinking about a lot of our folks are doing the newer kind of digital version of that. They're doing Facebook ads and funnels and websites and may think like, oh, this doesn't necessarily apply to me. And just because what Jay described has gone more digital in the last 15, 20 years does not make it any less true, whether you're doing that in a funnel and those kind of things. It's really thinking about adding value strategically and being okay with, break even or even losing on the front end, and, having some kind of back end. And also, like, I think, I don't know if enough people know this about you, but like a big part of this is like creating really beautiful experiences for the clients, right? Like in the Gary Halbert version, what I call the excuse my crassness, Jay, but I call that the I fuck on the first date mentality, where I'm just trying to get you into bed as quick as possible and move on.
Yeah, I get it.
With that mentality, like you said, I'm thinking about what's the shittiest, least amount of packaging I can use, because you're not really trying to build some kind of long-term relationship.
No, the other one was very strategically aware that the experience was as important as the proposition.
Yeah.
And the experience was sensory, excuse me, sensory, but
A little
also
sensual too, Jay. Don't
yeah, it
don't.
could be sensual. That's probably, and also acknowledged and made to feel special.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. I mean, you know, Well, I'll give you another one that's sort of interesting. And again, it's not digital. So I had a large client in Tokyo, Japan, a few years ago, that was the largest driving school in Tokyo. Now that's the good news. The bad news is there's a window of ages upon which like 90% of the people are responsive. It's 19 to 30 years old. And most people only buy one driving course. It's about $3,000. With the laid-in costs, it's about $1,000 profit after everything. And literally, that's it. They tried defensive driving. Few people do it. They had no back end. And we're talking strategy here. So I looked at, most people don't look at the implications, correlations, evolution of a buyer, what they buy first, second, third, before, during, after, instead.
Yeah.
So I got some really interesting data on their typical student who graduates. Number one, 33% of the graduates got their license but never drove. It was just a badge of honor having a
That's
license.
interesting. Yeah, I guess in Tokyo, right?
It is right. The other 66 and 2/3% split almost equal. Half would buy a car, half would only rent cars on weekends and holidays. But if the average age is, let's call it 25, and they are going to drive until they're, let's call it 65, that's 40 years of rental, right?
Yeah.
So I said to the driving school, you're doing this wrong. Your business isn't driving school. Driving school is the front end. Your business is having car rental, because you'll get residual revenue forever from these people. And they did it. They partnered with a couple of rental companies, and it killed. The back end was, the front end was little. It was the lead generator. They made profit, but the back end was where they made all their profit. And then once we perfected it, we had them go to every driving school in Japan and use the same concept and partner with the driving schools to do these with them. But it's thinking totally different, I think, is the point you're trying to make, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it is like you said, like deeply thinking about the customer journey. Like a lot of times, one of my other mentors says, people are so product focused, they don't really think about what happens in that journey after. Like you said, like every kind of problem solved creates a new problem. Like in business, I see it like in really simple terms. When people are struggling to get customers and they solve that problem, they usually almost always have fulfillment problems like right after. Like one leads to the other. And so like this is true of really any product or services, that there's something coming after it. I love that you're looking at, like, when it seems to me like more than anything, it's the way after, I don't know, like 20 years of listening to your stuff, is that when somebody comes in the door, you're looking at the entire business, not just this little front end piece. Is where almost always inevitably like 90% of people's focus goes to how can we optimize the front end, make more sales, and kind of tweak the levers in that process. As where you're saying, well, this business is a more fluid, continuous experience for the clients. How can we provide more value after that initial front end? And when you think about that, like there's endless opportunities. I also think like some of those conversations are super easy. Like I imagine if you go to a driving or a car rental place and say, hey, we want to recommend you guys, like they're not like you, when you show up as a mass buyer and say, hey, we're just looking for a little kickback on that, and you guys would fulfill and take care of our people. I don't imagine it's a very difficult conversation to have, right? Because you're
really, it is, and you can actually, depends on, there's a concept called the hooker syndrome, which means the service is worth a lot more before it's rendered than after. The key is to tie up the deal before the valuability and the success of it is evident, because then it's harder to negotiate.
It's a J. Abraham writer downer, by the way, the hooker syndrome.
Yeah, but we would actually set up facilities right at the driving school that we had half the profit. They would provide it. They would get to back out their hard cost. Everything above that was profit every month. We'd split. but I'd be good at negotiating too. And I think part of being strategic is understanding psychological and transactionally how to negotiate, and also how to be so fluid that you know how to make a deal, not how to lose a deal.
Yeah. Be curious to know like how you think about like approaching deals, because you're a master at it. I'm sure you could fill 40 volumes of DVDs with how you approach it. But I think, one of the things I've learned from you is that you're always thinking about like the underlying thing is you're thinking about how to give value, as where most people are thinking about how do I take it? How do I extract?
That's very
Like,
well. Yeah, and I think you're right. I learned from masters that if you can't fall in love with the market you serve, you shouldn't be serving them. And if you can, you think about, okay, if I were in the shoes of the recipient, what's going on? Hopes, fears, what's going to make them, what's going to allay their fears, what's going to make them feel special, what's going to address things nobody else does. What's the journey beyond the transaction that I currently have with them? And this concept, what do people buy before, during, after, and instead? I mean, we've had companies I've helped that made more money from the people they normally wouldn't sell by selling them something that was an alternative that they were going to buy anyhow from somebody else.
yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times people think their market is infinite and like, anyone who's a blank, and almost always the people they're best suited to help, like, there's a range, and there's always, like you said, like people that just for whatever reason aren't a fit. And most people don't think strategically about, how can we serve the people who, were gracious enough to come to us, but for one reason or another aren't a fit for what we do. I think there's a real brilliance in looking at a business that way too, is holistically saying, how can we care about everybody? How can we contribute even to the people who will never become customers? And as you mentioned, sometimes it's the easiest thing in the world to pick up some kind of what, the we would call in our world an affiliate commission from it for recommending something that they would go and buy anyway.
Yeah, and well, I can address that a little bit because I have a really a passionate belief that most affiliates are blowing opportunity because they all do pretty much the same thing. They send the same communication out. Uh, when I used to do it was much more sophisticated. I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I would understand the relationship that my partner had with his or her audience, and we would write totally to that relationship. And we would make sure no two communications were ever the same because a lot of duplication. Back then, the average newsletter subscriber subscribed to 5 different newsletters.
Yeah.
So I made sure every communication was very unique and very distinctive. And I made sure that it was always based on service to the client. It was always based on demonstrating that I know how you feel. I know what you're trying to get closer to or away from. And I believe whatever we were advocating in that behalf helps fulfill that in some way. And here's why and how. And I always made guarantees that were so irresistible.
Yeah. Yeah, almost over the top, because I've seen a few year guarantees where it's like you can't lose, really. I mean, that's the whole.
Now today, this, everybody and their brother. When I started, just for a reference, when we gave bonus programs, they were real. They were programs that were really being sold right then for $2,000, but we were selling 15 to $25,000 training programs. When we made I would always, for myself or my client, and we did $250 million of training programs in about 3 years when I was about your age. And we had not one, we had sometimes 4 different levels of risk reversal embedded in an offer. So it was really, it was almost, we identified every inherent reason why somebody wouldn't go forward. And we always wanted to make it easier to go forward and say yes rather than no.
Yeah. Can I actually just elaborate on that a little bit? Because you were a huge inspiration. There's actually a training in our group that, it's been seen thousands and thousands of times. And I call it the unfair sales advantage. And a big part of that, like you mentioned, with your risk reversal is underneath that is, and I learned this from you, is like really having a voice to the market. I remember this is a little bit of a tactical thing, but I remember you said when you wrote copy that you would go to Amazon and you'd grab all the books on the topic and look at the 5 and 1 star reviews and see what people were trying to move towards and what they were moving away from it. And they said in their own passionate words, in their own way. And often Amazon even makes it easier because they upvote the answers people agree with. So you can see like how repetitive an idea is. And I've taken this a little bit further because I found a couple sites you can do it as well as Amazon, but you can really get into the mindset of the person you're intending to serve. And the beautiful thing about like being online is you can actually go read people's innermost thoughts on a subject if and it's like it's right out there in the open. And I learned that from you. So big kudos.
Yeah, and two things. We call it the Amazon.com School of Marketing. And if you understand it, you can write better copy following it than most professional copywriters. And just no, I can go into it if you want me to, but we actually have a SaaS based system that'll be out in about 3 months. We're going to sell. Maybe you can be a partner with us. We're going to sell it to ad agencies and copywriters because I've proven that I can help somebody write better copy than, maybe not than a Gary Benzavinga or whoever the top line, but better than 90% of the copywriters just by using Amazon and discussion groups and reviews and if they understand the psychology that basically we have a concept that I introduced years ago, Frankie, you know about it. It's called the strategy of preeminence, and it's about elevating your product, service, company, yourself to the role as being seen as the most trusted advisor for life. But part of it, inherent in it, is being able to put into words for the first time ever what people really want or don't want in ways no one has ever articulated, where the subconscious says to the person, they understand me. I've never thought about it that way before. Yes, that is exactly what I want or don't want. Yeah. And they understand it. Thus they must be able to provide it.
Yeah. I think there, a step people miss in that journey is I think people are so eager to go try stuff out as they miss step one, which what you're really doing to me is and I think all the pros do this across every industry. This, I know, like you're probably like the number one guy in the world at it, but everybody everywhere who does this, which is really like an active, deep listening of the market and understanding, who these people are, like having a real empathy, like actually caring about them beyond just seeing them as a transaction. I like to joke about this, but it's kind of true. Like I think a lot of people in our space see everybody as a credit card with legs. Like they occasionally got a pulse and they're engaged in some sort of wrestling match of like, how can I pry the credit card out of their hand? And if you think about it more as like who are these people and how can I contribute something to them? Like you said, you can set up these huge deals for you that on step 2, you're the highest paid person in the deal, but everybody else gets what they want first. And there's a real magic to that kind of structure. Not that that's your only strategy. You got about 90 million.
But you're actually right. And part of the key is you got to be willing to fall in love with the clients you or your company or your client, if you're a copywriter, serves. And you've got to be able to really understand what it's like to be in their life. And what I find and one of the reasons that I stopped, for many years, we didn't even take opt-ins. We just gave shit away because I got sick of seeing all the hype and all the bullets and all the buzzwords and all the superficiality. And it made me sick because they didn't really try to understand, what, the real depth of humanity that represented this man or woman who was their target audience. And the more you understand them and they see that you do, if you're playing a long game, not just a tactical game, the more residual yield you're going to get out of the relationship. But you've got to be able to see your product or service deployed in that person's life and the impact it makes after they purchase. I think most people think about it until they purchase.
Yeah, 100%.
And then they're out of here. I think the key where you really gain advantage is if you understand. So if I help you So if this interview impacts people, what it's going to mean is people that listen are going to look at what they do, who they do it with, how they do it differently. What that's going to mean is they're going to be able to connect with their audience more authentically. What that means is it'll be more sales, shorter sales cycles. What it means is people will trust them more and they'll buy more. What it means is whatever product or service that company is selling will get into the hands, if the product or service has relevant value, it'll get in the hands of more people who can benefit. What it means is the people who can benefit will have either more security, more happiness, less weight, more self-esteem, greater sex life, more career. And what that will mean is their families will have more security, their futures will be, and you have to go all those levels. And if you can't do that, then whoever can has an advantage over you.
Yeah. By the way, I can just confirm, because you mentioned the better sex life. You got 7 kids. I just talked to your daughter, Michelle, for like an hour yesterday. So Jay's not kidding. Like, he's a master pro at this. You used a magic phrase when you say like the theory of preeminence. The last 2 words to me are for life. And it's a very different way of looking at a client relationship, because like you said, most people in this transactional space are just looking at, like you said, up until the purchase, and then after that. And you see this sometimes. I see this when companies have big sales forces where they literally sometimes they sell their thing and then you can't even reach anybody at the company like after the transaction has taken place. And if you're thinking about that as a client for life, the opposite is true. I call it, my version of this in our agency space is I call it welcome aboard, rather than, because a lot of clients in our space, they refer to people as, how can I onboard them? Which in digital marketing agency means, lingo speak means like, how can I get their passwords and logins so I can start running the ads and go do my thing? And I think there's a step you mentioned, and I think the jeweler example illustrates that, is we don't want to just put the shittiest packaging on it and get them through the door as fast as possible, but we want to like really acknowledge the leap of faith that has taken place and how much it means to us and how much we're going to support that relationship and how this is the beginning of something great. Not, and it comes down to those 2 words, for life. I wonder where you really like, if there's a place you first picked this up, or mentors, because you've really pioneered this in the business space of just.
Yeah, well, I learned from masters. It's optimization, really, highest and best use. If you understand that one approach is a static one-time transaction, and with the right purpose-driven commitment to your audience, you turn one shot into forever. And doesn't matter what you sell now. If you're the most trusted advisor for life, they will trust you to advise them on lots of other things within and outside of the purview of the mere category you sell to them, if you earn or deserve and maintain that trust. Trust is, and if people don't study soft skills, people like Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of the late Stephen R. Covey, and young people probably don't even know what 7 habits are, but he's the world authority on trust building on steroids. And he's proven that if you command absolute trust in your business, your salespeople, your whatever, the impact is an extra 300% potential enhancement in what you're doing. There's all kinds of things, but it all stems from what's your purpose. If your purpose is to make money, you'll never make everything you can. If your purpose is to make a difference in somebody's life or situation, and that is first and foremost what you are focused on. And I believe I'm having another ADD moment. In my opinion, Frankie and everybody, you are rewarded in life in direct proportion to the quantity, quality, and consistency of problems you solve and opportunities you make possible for others. Others can be people who spend money with you. Others can be people who work for you. Others can be suppliers who provide to you. The more you understand that, first of all, the more liberating the whole concept of business is, because it's more enjoyable, satisfying, fun, humanistic. connective, and the more reward you get, so the more profitable it becomes as well.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. Actually, if you got a little bit more time, I don't know how long we can keep you here.
I miss it. I can go for maybe. Let me just double check because let me see where my phone is. I got to see. I got another client, but let me see one.
Yeah, we really appreciate this, Jay. I mean, your mind is legendary. I actually was talking to Brian before you got on, and just about. I know how hard your team works to implement your crazy.
Brian, why don't you get on right now on the conference bridge and tell Jason that he needs to call me in 15 minutes on my cell, and I can give you 10 or 15 minutes. Okay.
Love it.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Frankie.
Love it. So I was thinking about something you said earlier, because I know something that's really top of mind for our people is they're out there, they're running a lot of paid advertising campaigns for clients, and they're seeing this rising ad cost. And one of the things you talked about, I call this concept dinner in a show, which is the idea that if you think about like what somebody does before and after, there's always other like related purchases that go together. And if you sell shows, sometimes the cost of running paid advertising shows can be astronomical. But yet, if you advertise that same thing to people who are out buying dinner at that moment, sometimes it's fractions of a penny compared to what that same traffic would cost you. And it really comes down to
very brilliant. Yeah. So remember I said, what do people buy before, during, after, instead?
Yeah.
So let's go to before. So if you see that, I mean, I've done this with people who sell things on Amazon. I said, okay, look at the correlation. People buy this, buy these other things. If some of these other things are inexpensive and yours is more expensive, why don't you take those other things and start selling those at really inexpensive and be the leader in low price, so you get all the buyers for that and you have a preemptive access to the market. But we've done, every time we find, okay, people who buy this are going to buy this category first. So why don't you own this category so you have access to that ahead of everybody else? And if this just broke even, then your cost of this is zero.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is amazing too, because I think actually the fact that so much of this has gone digital in the last 15, 20 years actually makes it easier for people who can see the preeminence, because often there's zero cost of acquisition.
I agree.
The people are open to playing ball. The information is available, the people who do this. And it comes really just thinking about like the whole customer journey of like what's going to happen before and after. And, we're actually experimenting this with right now, but I'm in some markets where, like typical cost per click of advertisements might be about $20, $30 a click. And we're running ads just one step before for like 4 cents a piece, sometimes like 2 cents. And
it's brilliant.
And it's abundant and cheap, and just understanding like we're just gonna bring them into our world one step later.
Yeah, but when you understand the power of strategic, integrated, perpetual thinking, if that word phrase makes sense, so I have a lot of belief systems. One of them is how to gain absolute ethical advantage over everybody else. Well, you can't do it if you're a tactical thinker.
Yeah.
You can't do it if you're a linear thinker. You can't do it if you're only focused on what you sell. But you can own your market if you can think before, after, instead, at the same time. You have massive advantage. And most people, I'll give you the simplest, and everyone would know this today, but years and years ago, I've been around for a long time. I was involved with Entrepreneur Magazine when it first came out. And to show you a different side to the world, when it first came out, it was direct mail. You didn't have digital marketing. We had to send letters out selling subscriptions to our membership, but nobody had ever heard of the word entrepreneur. We had to put on the outside of these envelopes the Webster's dictionary, not just definition, but how to pronounce the word.
That's
really
amazing.
How to pronounce the word. But we thought that the only market we could serve are people who wanted to see new emerging startup businesses. But we realized that was a fallacy. People they didn't care. The same people that wanted option trading, or they wanted flipping real estate, or they wanted Forex, or they wanted or they wanted, to get career retraining, or they wanted to buy a friend. They just wanted to make more money.
Yeah.
But people don't understand correlations, implications. They're too busy being very, and I would say that if you want
Myopic is the
to,
word I would use.
what is?
Myopic. Like,
It's a great word, and it's the kiss of death in a downward market.
yeah. Yeah, I love that you just bring so much abundance thinking. I think, more than anything, what I've picked up from you over the years, like obviously you have a super amazing articulate way of describing like how to think about this, but I just love how abundant your mindset is, and you're so giving with your time. Like, for those of you guys who don't know, an hour and a half with Jay, like if you paid for that, is he's probably the highest paid guy on earth for that. So the value you've shared here is just astronomical, and we really appreciate you doing that.
You're welcome.
Well, there's a lot of folks out here who want to grow businesses and contribute to other businesses, and you give so freely in that, and it's an honor to be able to do this.
No, it's my pleasure, and I hope it helps. But I mean, if I can leave with a, with a sort of an aggregate commentary, I've got a couple, if I may.
I said we'll
One
keep
of
you
them,
as long
of
as you
course-
want to go.
Well, it's a quote, and it's not an original quote. I can't remember who it was. I want to say Bob Proctor, but I'm not sure. But he said most people in life struggle with the wrong question, and it's not verbal; it's nonverbal. It's sort of torment that drives people batty crazy and makes them very stressed. And the question is, in essence, am I worthy of this goal? Can I really compete in a downward market? Can I, make my living? Can I, can I have a lifestyle I want? Can I, whatever it is? And what he said, which I agree, is when you realize how much more is possible from time, effort, investment, access to a market, distribution, capital, human capital, relational capital, intellectual capital, now and in the future. The right question is not, am I worthy of this goal? It's, is this goal worthy of me? Because there's so much more that is possible. The second is, anybody who insists on playing the game of business or a career, even tactically, is, I want to be very polite. They're not dumb, but they're very, very imprudent, because the same effort or less, same time or less, can give you such a greater result now and in the future. And it's not just the result. When you are integrating preeminence, strategy, and contribution together, it is, if you understand how to think beyond avarice, which is just making money for money's sake, it is so much more satisfying, so much more fulfilling, so much more liberating. It propels you way up to a rarefied strata of thinking and being and transacting, and your business, product, service is elevated in the mind of the market, and everything about playing at that level is, it's not linear. It's an asymmetric. I mean, it just keeps, it's outsized in everything, tangible, intangible, you get out of it now and in the future. And my question has always been, why, and whoever's name you want to use, God's or anybody's, Buddha's, or whoever you believe in, why would you possibly accept less everything, less impact, contribution, fulfillment, wealth creation, asset value than you could, just because of rigid thinking?
Yeah, that's huge. I love that paradigm shift of, instead of looking at a goal and thinking like, am I worthy of deserving this, is thinking like, just forces you to up level. I sometimes find, the best thinkers are really not always the ones with the answers, or the ones who ask the best questions. And I think what you just gave us is a real gem there of like, is that goal worthy of me?
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, but I just want to say thank you. This has been amazing for me. I really appreciate it. Your daughter is super cool. I was actually talking to Brian about that, because I just met Brian at the start of this. Your team is amazing. Gotten a chance to know your team members, and I love how you put together just an awesome group of people. And I don't know. I'm hoping to increase both of our impact with this. So thank you so much for doing
thank you
this.
very much. You're gracious. I hope it does. And all I can do is try, but hopefully that a few of the comments we just made will land and maybe take root.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that I know I can speak firsthand. If you just listen to Jay, you'll be smarter at business and you'll be better at it. And you'll think less about like how can I take, which is where most people begin. How can I get? How can I get? And you'll think a lot more about what you can give. And as a result, you'll get a lot more, which is the ironic thing is the less you think about what I can get, the more you actually get in the journey.
Very well. Thank you very much, Frank.
All right.